Hey there, folks. Ben Farrell for Ben Farrell Freelance. This is episode 15, and this week we're talking about life as inspiration. Hey there, Ben Farrell for Ben Farrell Freelance. This week we're talking about using your own life as inspiration. And by that I mean you're using the inspiration of things that have happened to you, bad or good, as a mode to create something that you write and others will find interesting. Now for me, I didn't always used to do that because I was younger. I didn't have a whole lot of life. Now that I'm 47 years old and I've done a little bit more living, I start to find myself more and more taking little plot points from my own life and putting them into the stories that I'm writing. I've read several times over that Woody Allen tends to take bits of his own life and puts them into his stories, and he's done that for decades. By reputation, he uses his own life and takes certain facets of it, embellishes them, and makes them into a movie or parts of his movies. Which really makes me think Woody Allen's life must be saturated with infidelity, psychotherapists, and hookers. When I was in college, I wrote screenplays, produced a few, and some of them were good, but I wouldn't say all of them were, and to be honest, I now know what the problem was back then. I was too young. I was trying too hard to create characters that had life experience that expanded beyond my own, and I couldn't relate to them. But then, in the last couple of years of college, I did stumble across a story idea that I was able to flesh out because I did have experience that I could relate to the characters for. It was called 24 Hours in Something Original, and it was actually a byproduct of some of the things I was actually experiencing those last 2 years of college. So let me explain real quick. I actually teamed up with a regional comic named Napoleon Hudson, and together we developed and shot and produced a sketch comedy show for television, and we got it on Rocky Mountain Public Access, which was in Denver and in Colorado Springs. And we started developing a fan base, and we had a writing team to do all the sketches, and things got turned down and things weren't turned down, and sometimes there were arguments as to what to put in the show. I enjoyed every minute of doing it. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughs. We did 2 full seasons before I ended up having to leave the show. The show's popularity got to a point where we could walk through downtown Denver and people would recognize us from the show and actually start singing our theme song. However, when it came to writing my first stage play, I came up with the idea of a bunch of writers who are thrown into a room by a TV network and forced to come up with some new show, otherwise they were all fired. And they had 24 hours to do it. So that's how 24 Hours in Something Original was born, and it was produced in Colorado Springs that summer after I wrote it. So that's just one example of me using my real life to create a byproduct that I could use for my craft. Ever since I had done that with that particular project, and especially since I thought that was probably the best thing I'd ever written thus far, that's all I did. I really looked at my own life closer to see what inspiration I could pull from it for my story ideas. So now everything that I write has a little bit of me in it, has a little bit of my life in it, things that I embellish and make more interesting or funny when it wasn't, but it should have been. I get to change things that were in my life and make it entertaining to people because people like telling their own story. And I also believe that most people like hearing what's funny about your own story. So probably my biggest example of using your life as inspiration is the musical that I wrote, Deadly Intentions, which is the play that we're featuring for free if you do our contest, which is at the end of this episode. So when I'm in my late 30s, I start having kids, I'm married, and I'm being a dad and a husband. And this was nothing I ever expected, and everything that I was writing started to lean towards that because that was what my life was. But a couple years after I had my first kid, we found out we were having boy-girl twins who have been seen on this show. So all of a sudden, in just a matter of years, I go from being single to being married. I now went from 1 kid to 3 kids, and I have a career that's very demanding. So here I am with all these responsibilities, a lot of people around me looking to make them happy and looking to make them safe and comfortable. And it suddenly dawned on me that as a writer, as an aspiring writer or a fledgling writer, if you guys have life getting in the way, that can be very, very aggravating. And it really coins the phrase, life gets in the way. Because I'll be spending time on my writing project, but all of a sudden there's a honeydew that comes up, or there's a daddy can you please, or there's a sales call I have to take, and all of a sudden it's a few days, maybe even a week, maybe even a couple weeks before I get back to doing some creative writing time. So I found myself struggling to keep up with my craft because I was a father and a husband. However, in 2018, come to find out my father has cancer. My mother had already passed away 5-6 years before that, and now my father has an expiration date. So at that time, everything really started to come down on me in the way that, how am I going to be an honorable son and a good husband and a great father and still keep up with my craft, and it was just so much to deal with. It was almost impossible to balance. Except I did come up with one idea that helped me through it all. I came up with an idea of a man in my exact same situation. Finds out his father's dying, and he just had twins, and he's trying to figure out how to be a good husband, father, and an honorable son while still chasing his dreams. I used to ask my mother, why do you always write so much? And her response was always, because writing is cheaper than therapy. And that's what it is for me. It's therapeutic. So if I'm going through something with my life, I definitely cling to something that I'm writing to get me through it. But in the instance of writing this musical, that actually was a legitimate way that I coped with the fact that my father was dying. It was such my way of coping that even with all my preliminary development and actually writing the first draft, I was able to finish it in 4 months. And I did it so fast that I actually was able to read it to my father before he died. So I'm not trying to spend this episode telling you my own stories. I'm just trying to say that once I started using my own life in my writing projects got so much more engaging, so much more interesting, and people had so much more in-depth things to say because they could relate to some of these things. What I'm saying is, as far as being a writer with a daytime job as well and a family, I know that life gets in the way and keeps you from your craft. But now, I don't see it that way. I really do look at what gets in the way, what is keeping me from my writing, and how can I turn that into something that I want to write. I decided a long time ago that I was going to grab a pen, I was going to grab some paper, and I am going to make life my bitch. Anyways, next time you're cranking out a written work and life throws you a curveball, think of your situation and try to find a way to make it help your writing instead of prevent you from it. This is Ben Farrell for Benn Farrell Freelance. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hey there, folks. As promised, we have a new contest period for the next 2 months. For this contest, what I'd like you to do is write a 3-sentence story to go along with the photo that I'm about to show you.
And this photo is really weird.
Okay, so send in your 3-sentence story to go along with that picture, and all the entries will be put into a raffle, and if your name is drawn in that raffle, you'll get a free copy of one of my stage plays. Which stage play are we going to offer this time?
Deadly Intentions.
Deadly Intentions. It's the only musical I've ever written. It's actually very funny, and if you want to learn a little bit more about it, where can they go?
BennFarrellWriter.com.
BennFarrellWriter.com. So that's it. Go ahead and get those entries in. I appreciate you hanging out with us. This is Ben Farrell for Ben Farrell Freelance.
And stay safe and keep watching our videos.
Keep watching those videos.
Bye.